Russia's getting yet more help from North Korea in its ongoing invasion of Ukraine.
According to Ukrainian intelligence, up to 30,000 more may be headed to the front lines for use in a summer offensive.
North Korea has so far sent an estimated total of 14,000 troops, including 3,000 reinforcements, to replace its losses.
With Moscow hungry for manpower and Pyongyang keen to school its troops.
Kim Jong-un confirmed for the first time that North Korean troops were sent to fight alongside the Russians against Ukraine.
In a shocking move, Ukrainian intelligence reports that North Korea is preparing to send up to 30,000 more troops to fight for Russia in Ukraine. That's on top of the 15,000 already deployed, many of whom never came back. This isn't just about battlefield reinforcements. It's about a regime trying to avoid collapse. With Russia's domestic issues reaching a boiling point, Putin is terrified of the backlash another draft could trigger at home. And so, instead of hiring inward, he's outsourcing the bloodshed to another dictatorship, willing to trade their lives for missiles. In this video, we'll expose why Putin is scrambling for help, the brutal cost of Putin's war, and why this move could change the future of global conflict. Let's start by addressing what North Korean troops are doing so far from home. The brutal truth is that the war in Ukraine has been a disaster for Russia. Over 1 million of Putin's troops have already been killed or wounded, and 2024 alone saw more losses than the first 2 years of the invasion combined. Tanks and vehicles are being shredded by Ukrainian attacks, leaving the army stretched thin. Without help, Putin risks losing ground and control. That's where North Korea steps in. And if you're still watching, you probably care about the truth behind this war. But stories like this one, well, they get buried by the algorithm, especially when they make Putin and Kim look weak. So hit like and subscribe if you want to help push this video to more people, especially the ones who still think Russia's winning. To understand why Putin's turning to North Korea for soldiers, you've got to look at the history. Russia and North Korea, they go way back, with Soviet troops helping to set up North Korea after World War II and hand-picking Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-un's grandfather, to run it. After some hot and cold relations over the decades, things got tight after 2014, when Russia took Crimea and got hit with sanctions. Both are outcasts. They started trading. Russia sent oil and food, and North Korea offered cheap labor. By 2024, they signed a defense pact, promising to back each other. And this isn't just a deal, it's a partnership built on decades of shared struggles and now shared despair. Now that we see how this partnership started, let's talk about what North Korea is actually sending to Russia's war. Both Kim and Putin see themselves as outsiders in a world dominated by Western powers, and they share a goal of pushing back against that influence. For Russia, North Korea is a source of manpower and weapons, like artillery shells and ballistic missiles. For North Korea, Russia offers advanced technology, oil, and maybe even a chance to ease some of the international sanctions it has. It's a win-win for two leaders who don't have many friends on the global stage. But this alliance isn't just about practical stuff like troops and weapons, it's also about sending a message. By teaming up, Putin and Kim are showing the world they're not alone, even if most countries condemn their actions. They're building a kind of anti-Western club, where they can support each other and thumb their noses at the United States, Europe, and their allies. That's why you've seen high-profile visits like Russian officials traveling to Pyongyang, North Korea's capital, or Kim and Putin holding ceremonies to celebrate their friendship. These moments aren't just for show. They're a signal that this partnership is here to stay, and it's only going to get stronger. Now that brings us to the troop deployments that have been going on. Since late 2024, Kim Jong-un has been sending thousands of soldiers to Russia, with estimates ranging from 11,000 to 15,000 troops. These soldiers aren't just sitting around. They're being used in real combat, especially in places like the Kursk region, where Russia has been trying to push back Ukrainian forces. Some are also doing support work, like building fortifications or handling logistics to support Russia's fractured lines. Now, the news of an extra 30,000 troops is a major escalation to an existing problem. That's nearly triple the number already sent, and it shows that Russia is leaning hard on this partnership. So how effective will these troops be in changing the tides of war? Well, that's where things get murky. Some experts think North Korean soldiers could help Russia by adding sheer numbers to the battlefield. They're known for being disciplined and able to endure tough conditions, which is no small thing in a grueling war like this one. But others, they are not so sure. These soldiers aren't trained for modern warfare the way Russian or Ukrainian forces are. They're used to North Korea's outdated military tactics, which rely heavily on massed infantry and old-school equipment. In Ukraine, where technology like drones and precision precision strikes dominates, they might struggle to keep up. Plus, Western intelligence estimates that around 6,000 of the first wave of North Korean troops were killed or injured. This suggests that they're taking heavy losses. Picture these young soldiers, some just 17 years old, huddling in icy trenches, drones buzzing overhead. They're far from home, fighting a war they don't understand, knowing that if they're captured, their families might be executed. If that trend continues, 30,000 more soldiers might not be the game changer Russia is hoping for. In addition to that, there are some serious hurdles to clear. For one, these North Korean soldiers don't speak Russian or Ukrainian, and they've never fought in a place like Ukraine before. The terrain, the weather, the way the war is fought with drones, long-range missiles, and constant trench warfare, all of these are new to them. On top of that, moving 30,000 people across thousands of miles from North Korea to Russia's front lines, it's a logistical nightmare. North Korea's old ports and slow Russian ships take days to reach Vladivostok, dodging detection. Russia's overstretched rails mean dozens of train trips, and at the front, supplies are scarce. Some North Koreans are scavenging to survive. It shows how much Putin's struggling. So if Putin is relying on North Korea, then why not just call up more Russians? After all, Russia is a huge country with a population of about 146 million people. So you'd think they'd have plenty of soldiers to call up. Why are they not recruiting manpower from within? Well, that's where things get tricky at home. One major reason is what we briefly touched on earlier. Russia has already lost a staggering number of soldiers in Ukraine. These are young men, mainly in their 20s and 30s, who are no longer coming home to their families. The war has dragged on far longer than Putin expected, and the losses are piling up. Every time Russia announces a new wave of mobilization, it sends a wave of fear through the country. Parents don't want to lose their sons, and young men don't want to be sent to war where survival isn't guaranteed. This fear has already caused problems. When Putin announced a partial mobilization in September of 2022, it triggered a mass exodus. Hundreds of thousands of Russians, mostly young men, fled to neighboring countries like Georgia, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. All this was to avoid being drafted. Others went into hiding inside of Russia, moving to remote areas or finding ways to dodge conscription notices. The government has cracked down, with police rounding up men at train stations and workplaces, but the resistance is real. Forcing more Russians into the army now would only make things worse, and Putin knows it. He's walking a tightrope, trying to keep the war going without pushing his people too far. After all, if you push people far enough, they'll revolt. Another huge issue is Russia's population problem. Even before the war, Russia was in trouble demographically. The country's birth rate has been low for decades. People are dying faster than they're being born. In 2023, Russia's population shrank by about 600,000 people, and that's not just because of the war. High death rates, especially among men, are driven by things like alcohol-related illnesses, heart disease, and COVID-19, which hit Russia hard. The war has made this crisis even worse. The young men dying on the battlefields aren't just soldiers, they're the future workforce. They are the people who would start families and keep the economy running. However, this future workforce simply isn't there, and that's casting a huge shadow on Russia's already crashing economic future. Right now, Russia's working-age population is shrinking fast. By 2030, experts predict there will be millions fewer workers than there are today. Drafting more young men would pull even more out of the economy, leaving factories, offices, and farms short-staffed. It's not just about today's war, but it's about what Russia will look like in 10 to 20 years. If Putin keeps sending his young men to die, there won't be enough left to build a future. On top of that, the war has driven away some of Russia's best and brightest. This brain drain is a long-term disaster, and Putin can't afford to make it worse by drafting more of the people Russia needs to survive. Then there's the political sides of things. Putin has been in power for over 25 years, and he's built his rule on a kind of unspoken deal with the Russian people. It works like this: you stay out of politics, and I'll keep things stable. But the war has tested that deal. The 2022 mobilization wasn't just unpopular, it sparked protests in cities across Russia. That's something you don't see often in a country where dissent is risky. People were angry, not just about the draft, but about the way the war was disrupting their lives. Prices for food and goods have gone up, and Western sanctions have made everything from cars to electronics harder to get. Basically, the Russian economy is in shambles, and the citizens blame that on the war. Another big draft push could push people over the edge, especially in big cities like Moscow and St. Petersburg, where Putin's support is strongest. To avoid this, Putin has been smart about who he sends to the front lines so far. Instead of pulling people away from wealthy urban areas, they focused on the poorer regions, especially places with ethnic minorities. Areas like Dagestan, Chechnya, and Siberia have supplied a lot of the troops, while cities like Moscow have mostly been spared. This isn't an accident. Ethnic Russians, especially in big cities, are the backbones of Putin's political base. If he starts drafting their sons en masse, it could turn them against him. Meanwhile, the minority groups and rural communities have less political clout, so basically their complaints don't carry the same weight. It's a cold calculation, but that's how Putin's been able to keep the war going without stirring up too much trouble at home. There's also the issue of how Russians are feeling about the war itself. Early on, many believed the government's story that it was a quick operation to protect Russian interests. But 3 years in, with no end in sight and bodies coming home, that story's starting to wear thin. Polls are hard to trust in Russia because people are scared to speak out. Despite this, independent surveys from 2024 suggest that only about half the population still supports the war. The other half is either opposed or just tired of it. Other polls show that the majority favors peace talks and an end to the war. Young people especially are fed up. They're the ones facing conscription, and they don't want to die for a conflict that's starting to feel kind of pointless. If Putin tries to mobilize another 100 or 200,000 Russians, he'd be risking not just protests, but a broader loss of faith in his leadership. And that's why he's been leaning on other sources for manpower. They've also used prisoners, offering them freedom in exchange for fighting, and mercenaries who are paid to join up. But those have their limits. Russia's prisons aren't bottomless, and many of the inmates who signed up early on have either died or finished their contracts. Mercenaries like the Wagner Group are expensive and not always reliable. Some of Wagner's fighters even turned against the Kremlin in 2023, staging a short-lived rebellion. These options are running dry, and Putin needs new ways to keep his army staffed without poking the hornet's nest at home. That's where North Korea comes in, and it's worth taking a closer look at why this partnership makes so much sense for him. North Korea's soldiers are a perfect fit for Putin's needs. This is not because they're the best fighters, but because they're available and they don't cause trouble for him politically. North Korea has one of the largest armies in the world, with over 1.3 million active troops, and Kim Jong-un doesn't hesitate to use them however he sees fit. These soldiers are trained to obey orders no matter what, and they're used to living in tough conditions. Back home, meager food, long hours, and strict discipline are just part of life in the North Korean military. For Putin, this means he's getting troops who won't complain, won't desert, and won't spark protests back in Russia. They're essentially a ready-made army he can plug into the war without any of the domestic baggage. On top of that, Kim is willing to send these soldiers for a price, and it's a price Putin can pay. North Korea's economy is in rough shape thanks to years of sanctions and mismanagement. The country struggles to feed its people and its military, while it largely relies on outdated equipment. Russia, despite its own economic problems, has things North Korea desperately wants. Oil is a big one. North Korea needs it to keep its factories and military running. And Russia, well, they kind of have plenty to spare. Food supplies are another. North Korea's harvests have been poor for years, and famine is a constant threat. Russia can send grain and other staples to help keep Kim's regime stable. There's even talks that Russia might push for sanctions relief at the United Nations, though that's a long shot given the opposition from the US and its allies. However, when Kim Jong-un agreed to send soldiers to Russia, he wasn't just trading lives for food or oil. He had his eyes on something bigger: Russia's high-tech weapons know-how. North Korea has been trying to build scarier missiles and stronger defenses for years. Yet sanctions have made it tough to get the parts and the skills they need. Russia, with its massive weapons industry, is like a candy store for Kim. In return for troops and artillery shells, Putin's been sharing some serious tech that could make North Korea's military a lot more dangerous. This isn't just about a few new toys. It's about giving Kim the tools to threaten the world in ways that he couldn't before. Reports from early 2025 say Russia has handed over blueprints for advanced air defense systems like the S-400. These can shoot down planes or missiles from hundreds of miles away. You see, North Korea's current air defenses are old. Most of them are the Soviet era, and they struggle against modern jets from South Korea or the US. Getting S-400 tech could help Kim protect his missile bases and make it harder for enemies to strike. There's also talk of Russia helping with ballistic missiles. North Korea's been testing missiles that can hit the US, but they're not perfect. Some crash or miss their targets. South Korean intelligence says Russia is sharing guidance systems and satellite tech to make these missiles more accurate. In January of 2025, a North Korean missile test showed a new flight pattern, and experts think Russian engineers had a hand in it. But it's not just missiles. Russia is reportedly sending fighter jet parts like MiG-29 engines to upgrade North Korea's aging air force. A 2025 report even mentioned North Korean pilots training on Russian Su-25 attack planes in Vladivostok, learning how to fly in real combat. This kind of exchange is a big deal. North Korean pilots haven't seen action since the Korean War, and now they're getting battle experience. For Putin, sharing this tech is a way to keep Kim happy and make sure the troops keep coming. But it's a risky move. If North Korean missiles get better, it could spark a new arms race in Asia, with South Korea and Japan rushing to build stronger defenses. The US is already sounding alarms, saying in April of 2025 that Russian tech transfers could destabilize the Korean peninsula. Of course, this deal isn't risk-free for either side. Kim Jong-un rules North Korea with an iron fist, but sending 30,000 soldiers to fight in Ukraine isn't just a military decision, it's a gamble. One that could shake things up at home. North Korea's people are kept in line with propaganda that paints Kim as a godlike leader and the military as unbeatable. State TV brags about the army's strength, showing endless parades of goose-stepping soldiers. But now, those soldiers are dying in a faraway war that has nothing to do with North Korea. If thousands don't come back, it could crack the story that Kim's been selling his people. Families in Pyongyang or Hamhung might start whispering about why their sons and brothers are being sent to die for Russia. That's dangerous in a country where questioning the leader can land you in a labor camp. To keep a lid on this, Kim's regime is working overtime. In April of 2025, North Korean state media announced a monument in Pyongyang to honor soldiers sacrificed for justice in Kursk. This framed their deaths as heroic. They've also promised rewards for soldiers' families. These rewards include things like extra food rations or even membership in the Workers' Party, which is a big deal in North Korea's rigid system. South Korean intelligence say some families are getting monthly payments of $50, a fortune in a country where most people earn less than $10 a month. But these are just bandages on a bigger problem. A former North Korean soldier who defected in 2023 said troops sent to Russia see it as a chance to escape poverty. But if they survive and come home with stories of defeat or chaos, it could spark resentment. North Korea has never fought a war like this, and the regime isn't used to dealing with battle-hardened soldiers who've seen the outside world. There's also the risk of defections. Ukrainian forces captured 2 North Korean soldiers in January of 2025, and both tried to kill themselves rather than be interrogated, fearing their families would be punished. That's how tight Kim's grip is, but it also hints at cracks. If soldiers are captured or defect, they could share details about North Korea's military or even criticize the regime. That's a nightmare for Kim, who relies on secrecy to keep his country isolated. He's doubled down on propaganda, with 2025 reports saying schools are teaching kids that the Ukraine war is a fight against Western devils. But if the body count keeps rising, no amount of monuments or payouts might be enough to stop people from asking questions. Kim's betting his regime can handle the fallout, but it's a risky move that could test his control like never before. There's also the international fallout to consider. North Korea is already one of the most isolated countries in the world, and this move has drawn fresh condemnation from the US, South Korea, Japan, and many others. New sanctions are likely, and they could hit North Korea's economy even harder, making it tougher for Kim to be able to feed his people and keep his military equipped. Still, Kim seems to think the rewards outweigh the risks, and he's betting that closer ties with Russia will strengthen his regime in the long run. But Ukraine's not backing down. They're fighting smart and turning this alliance into a liability. They've been quick to adapt, using smart tactics to keep these new fighters from tipping the balance. North Korean troops are disciplined and aggressive, but they're not used to Ukraine's high-tech battlefield. Drones, precision strikes, and electronic warfare have exposed their weaknesses. In March of 2025, Ukrainian special forces blew up a Russian ammo depot in Kursk, packed with North Korean shells. 90% of the weapons were gone in one strike. In April, a drone strike wiped out 25 North Korean soldiers who didn't even know how to spot the buzzing overhead. Ukraine's also targeting their communications. Language barriers between Russia and North Korean units have caused confusion. So Ukrainian hackers have been jamming their radios to make things worse, and they're gathering intel as well. In January, 2 North Korean sergeants were captured in Kursk, revealing details about their training and morale. Leaflets in Korean have been dropped over enemy lines, urging soldiers to surrender. It's a long shot, but even a few defections could shake Kim's grip. These tactics show Ukraine isn't just reacting, they're outsmarting. By hitting supply lines, using tech, and exploiting every weakness, they're making sure North Korea's troops don't become the game changer Putin's counting on. Ukrainian officials are also using this to rally international support, pointing out that Russia's reliance on North Korea shows how desperate Putin is. It's a chance to paint Russia as a rogue state leaning on another rogue state, which could help Ukraine secure more weapons and aid. This alliance isn't just changing the war, it's shaking up the world. Here's how other countries are reacting. NATO has called this an escalation that makes the war far more dangerous. They're worried not just about the troops, but about what this means for global stability. If Russia and North Korea are teaming up this openly, it could inspire other authoritarian regimes to do the same. The US and European Union are talking about new sanctions to punish both countries. However, sanctions are already so tight that it's hard to find new ways to squeeze them. South Korea, which keeps a close eye on North Korea, is especially alarmed. They're concerned that Russia's help could make North Korea's military stronger, posing a bigger threat to the Korean peninsula. Globally, this alliance between Russia and North Korea is redrawing the map of power. It's not just about two countries helping each other, it's about a new kind of bloc forming. By teaming up, they're creating a counterweight to the US and its allies. Now, this isn't a full alliance yet, but it's a step towards one, and it's got other countries on edge. Iran, which has been supplying Russia with drones, might get closer to this group. Other authoritarian regimes could see this as a model, banding together to challenge the West. It's a shift that could make conflicts more common and harder to resolve. Ukraine also now has a chance to flip Russia's desperation into momentum. The fact that Putin is turning to North Korea for tens of thousands of troops makes it clear to the world that Russia is running out of options. That's something Ukraine can use. By showing that Moscow is leaning on one of the most isolated and brutal regimes on Earth, Ukraine can push its allies to step up even more. And they already have. Europe and Canada have pledged over 35 billion euros in military aid this year alone, with nearly 50 countries sending weapons, training, and support. Now, with North Korea in the mix, countries like South Korea are rethinking their stance, and new partners may be more willing to send weapons or even personnel. Ukraine can use this moment to argue that the war is no longer just about its borders. It's about stopping a growing alliance of dictators. And that message could unlock the next wave of support it needs to keep fighting. China, which is North Korea's biggest ally and a major player in the region, is in a tricky spot. On one hand, China doesn't love the idea of North Korea getting too cozy with Russia. A stronger Russia-North Korea alliance could reduce China's influence over Kim Jong-un. On the other hand, China doesn't want to alienate Russia, which it sees as a partner in pushing back against the US and its allies. So far, China has stayed quiet, but you can bet they're watching every move and weighing their options. If this alliance grows too strong, it might force China to take a clearer stand, which could shake up the global balance of power. Russia's war is a mess of its own making. Putin's obsession with conquest has set Russia back nearly 2 decades militarily and left it isolated, poorer, and weaker. 90% of its army is gone. $211 have been spent, and sanctions are crushing the economy. This wasn't a decisive war. It was a reckless invasion. And now, Russia is drowning in the consequences of its own aggression. What's sad is that Putin really hasn't learned his lesson. And this hands-on alliance with North Korea is just one more big mistake. Putin's turning to North Korea for soldiers isn't just desperate, it's humiliating. Russia, once seen as a global military power, is now begging one of the world's poorest and most isolated regimes to send troops to fight its war. These troops, underfed and unprepared, won't save him. They're just more lives lost. In the face of all this, Ukraine is staring down 2 dictators and still fighting. That's not just strength, but it's a spark of hope, showing the world what standing up to bullies really looks like.